How can I defend Israel as a Black woman? This is a question I have been asked so many times since I started openly supporting Israel. I think this is a really silly question. My skin color has nothing to do with how I think or how I come to conclusions. I used to be very anti-Israel back in the day, and that belief had everything to do with my skin color and nothing to do with using my brain or using facts or logic or critical thinking. Hello internet, my name is Kaya Willis and welcome back to my channel. In my last video, I talked about how I became a leftist and why I left the left. And during my time as a leftist, like I said before, I was very anti-Israel. Israel wasn't in an officially declared war when I was a leftist and when I was in university, but if it had been at the time, I would have been like a lot of these ignorant protesters that we're seeing on the news who are camping outside of their classes defending the fictional country of Palestine. Like most of these students, I didn't know anything about the Middle East, anything about the history of Israel or the conflict. I just knew that I was supposed to be against Israel because other people told me to. The only reason that I held this belief was because I was told it was a view that I was supposed to have as a Black woman. When I was a social justice warrior, I viewed everything through this oppressor lens. And entire demographics would be given one of these two labels, and I never questioned why. I was told that Israel was a racist apartheid state that was oppressing the brown Palestinians that lived there, and that all of this conflict was because the Palestinians were fighting back against their oppressors, the evil white European colonizers. And I was told that this was the exact same thing that happened in South Africa during apartheid. So I, as a Black woman, was supposed to support the Palestinians in their fight against oppressive Israelis. And I embraced this because I didn't know how to think for myself. I only knew how to agree with the group that I was supposed to belong to, even if they were just objectively wrong. And they were objectively wrong. First, let me say that this was a very stupid argument. Even if you look past the just factually incorrect statement that Israel is like South Africa, which I will address in a minute, the idea that I, as a Black person, am supposed to be able to relate to what happened in South Africa is just really silly. First of all, I am not South African. I have never been to South Africa. But even if I was born and raised in South Africa, I am not old enough to have lived under the apartheid state. So this idea that I, because of my skin color, would know what it's like to endure apartheid is just not true. I was born in the US. And contrary to what woke anti-racists want you to believe, the US has not had this problem for 60 years. And I am not 60 years old. And of course, I can have sympathy for people who are facing or have faced legal oppression, and I can be angry about it when it happens. I do not support what happened in South Africa with apartheid, and in current day, I'm very angry about what is going on with the way that gays and women are treated in a lot of these Middle Eastern countries. But anyone of any color can and should be angry about these things. This is not something that is specific to being Black. But I did believe that I needed to be angry about the apartheid happening in Israel because I was Black and for really no other reason. But that was until I saw a YouTube video that was shared by one of my friends on Facebook. Now, I don't know how this content ended up in my Facebook feed because I actively avoided at this point content that was against any of my views. But for some reason, I did end up watching this video, and it was of a Black South African man who had lived through much of apartheid. And what he was saying was that any comparison between Israel and South Africa is completely ridiculous. He explained that what happened in South Africa was that there were laws where white South African and Black South African citizens were treated completely differently. They couldn't live in the same neighborhoods. They couldn't go to the same schools. They couldn't eat at the same restaurants, go to the same bathrooms. They couldn't even be treated at the same hospitals. And Black South Africans couldn't vote in elections, and they couldn't serve in government. It was like the US Jim Crow laws that we had in the South, but instead of by state, it was the entire country. So there was this legalized racist segregation that impacted pretty much every aspect of life in South Africa. That, by definition, is what apartheid is. Look at what happened in South Africa, and let's contrast this with Israel. In Israel, Arab Muslim doctors can treat Jewish patients and vice versa. Hospitals there are not segregated. Jewish and Arab teachers teach both Jewish and Arab students in the same schools. The schools there are not legally segregated. There are no legally segregated restaurants or bathrooms. And not only can Arab Israelis vote in elections, but there have been Arab members of Israeli government since the country was founded in 1948. If you actually look at the laws in Israel, you won't find one that says you can't live in this neighborhood, or you can't have this job, or you can't serve in government because of your race. That was what happened in South Africa, but that was not and is not happening in Israel. Watching this video at the time, I felt very confused afterwards. This was around the time that I started questioning things on the left. And after doing a bit of research just to verify that what he said was true, I realized that this was just another lie that I had been told. Nothing that I had been told about Israel was true. I didn't really have a stance on the issue, though. Like I said before, there wasn't an active war happening at the time, and I wasn't really interested in international politics. So there wasn't a reason for me to do much more digging besides knowing that I wasn't going to continue to be blindly anti-Israel. But October 7th changed my mind and pushed me to dig further and do some more of my own research. When I woke up on October 7th and saw the horrific images and videos being posted from the Hamas attack, I didn't really understand what was happening. This was really my first time seeing war and the tragedy that it creates, and I couldn't wrap my head around how people could do such terrible, barbaric things. So I started doing my own research, and one of the first things I discovered that I did not know before October 7th is that the West Bank and Gaza are really in practice two separate countries from Israel. They have their own governments, they have their own borders. And the people who live in West Bank and Gaza are not Israeli citizens, and they don't want to be. Now, there are Arabs who live in Israel, are citizens of Israel, and like I said before, are treated the same as Jewish Israeli citizens. And in fact, a lot of them were actually very negatively impacted by October 7th. There are quite a few Arab Israelis who were taken hostage or killed during the Hamas attack. But I think the biggest surprise that I discovered when looking into what happened was that Hamas was not just some terrorist group that happened to be in Gaza. No, Hamas was the elected official government of Gaza. And they murdered almost 1,500 Israelis and took 100 more hostage. So why? Why did this happen? Because the apartheid accusation doesn't even apply to people who are living in a different country with their own government, with their own laws, with their own borders. So what was the goal of this attack? So again, I did some research, and my goal in doing research wasn't necessarily to back up one side or the other. It was just to learn the truth. I read history from the perspective of both sides. I listened to interviews from both Hamas and the Israeli government. I looked into policies and laws, and I watched as much footage from October 7th as I could. And that probably wasn't great for my mental health. No, it definitely wasn't great for my mental health, but I wanted to understand as deeply as possible what was going on. Here's what I learned. Israel was not created because Europeans decided to randomly go to the Middle East and start oppressing people, which is what I had been told before, because the left has this really twisted way of telling history to where anyone and anything that is remotely related to Europe becomes this like cartoon supervillain type of thing. The real history is that after World War II, after the Holocaust, when Jews were being massacred, really genocided for being Jewish, many of them fled and moved into the land called Palestine. Now, it's really important to note that at this time, it was not an independent Palestinian state. It was land that was under a British mandate that was created after the defeat of the Ottoman Empire after World War I. There has never been an independent Palestinian state. But anyways, Jews were starting to move into Palestine, and they were buying land, building businesses, building communities, and they were being murdered and attacked there too. And it really shouldn't be surprising that the Jews who lived there wanted to build borders between themselves and the people who wanted to kill them, whether these people were Nazis or Muslim terrorists living in Palestine. Now, the British mandate ended with the proposal to create two states, Israel and Palestine in that region. If both states had accepted the two-state solution, there would have been an independent Arab Muslim majority Palestinian state, and there would have been a Jewish majority state. And any Arabs that wanted to stay in Israel and the Jewish majority state would have been allowed to stay there. And the founding documents of Israel very clearly state that this was the case, that the goal was to create a state where people could live regardless of their race, regardless of their religion, and without violence. Israel's founding documents, their Declaration of Independence, says, "The state of Israel will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions. We appeal to the Arab inhabitants of the State of Israel to preserve peace and participate in the upbuilding of the state on the basis of full and equal citizenship and due representation in all its provisional and permanent institutions." So obviously, as we're seeing today, Israel accepted the deal, is a country, did what it said it was going to do in its founding documents. But Palestine did not accept this proposal. Once the country of Israel was founded, the surrounding Arab states and the Palestinians attacked Israel, and they attacked Israel over and over again. So anyone who was living in Israel after these attacks started and supported the violence either left or was reasonably not allowed to stay and continue to attack Jews. But these attacks from Palestinians and from the surrounding Arab countries continued for the last 75 years. Every single war that has happened with Israel has been initiated by the Arab Muslim majority countries around Israel. And Israel has worked and done its best to defend itself so that the Jews who live there don't get murdered like they did during World War II. Hamas and the majority of Gazan citizens who elected them into power and have kept them in power don't want Israel to exist. And they don't want Israel to exist because they want to kill the Jews who are living there. And Hamas has stated this explicitly, both in interviews and in their charter. The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight against the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind stones and trees. The stones and trees will say, "O Muslims, O Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." But that was then and this is now, right? A lot of people have claimed that Hamas has changed their views. They no longer want to kill Jews. No, that's not true. In 2018, a senior Hamas official said in a rally in Gaza, "We are looking forward to two important things which are within sight. The first is the cleansing of Palestine of the filth of the Jews and their uprooting from it. This is within sight. 4 years, my brother. By 2022, we will be rid of them. The second thing is the establishment of the caliphate, after the nation has been healed of its cancer, the Jews." But despite the constant threat of violence from its neighbors, Israel has managed to become the freest, most liberal country in all the entirety of the Middle East. And let me clarify here that I do not think Israel is a perfect country. I think there are some very valid criticisms of the policies that they have there. But when you compare Israel to any of the other countries in the area, not only does Israel want to peacefully coexist with its neighbors while these other countries try to attack it, but it is the only country in the region that was founded on the ideas that people can and should live with freedom of religion, freedom of speech, property rights, all of these things that the surrounding Middle Eastern countries don't have. Morally, Israel is a better country than the ones around it that are still oppressing women and gays and religious minorities and keep starting wars. And this is why I defend Israel. The more research that I do into the region, the more confident I am that Israel needs to exist. And these surrounding Islamic theocracies, they need to be destroyed. So one of the questions that I get asked a lot by people who have done their research, understand history, and have some semblance of a moral compass is, why are so many people supporting Hamas? Especially, why are there so many woke, intelligent people, especially at our universities, who claim that they're advocating for women's rights and gay liberation, all of these social justice things, but they're also supporting Gaza, whose policies and culture are antithetical to what they want? So I know from experience that a lot of people, especially the people at these universities, are just not doing their research. They are repeating what other people are telling them to, and they don't really know what they're talking about. But don't get me wrong. There are definitely some truly evil people out there who actually support Hamas's goal to wipe out all Jews off the face of the planet. And those people are just morally bankrupt beyond what I could even possibly imagine. But I think that most people, especially these students that we're seeing at universities, really just don't know what they're talking about. They're just being useful idiots. And it really is a sad thing because these students have access to all the resources that they need to understand what's going on. And all you need to do to understand what's going on is to listen to what Hamas and Israel are saying. When people tell you who they are, believe them. Listen to Hamas's interviews where they have said that they want to repeat October 7th over and over again until they have destroyed Israel and killed all the Jews. Read their founding documents where they quote their purposes to kill Jews. Look at the Houthis and Hezbollah and the Iranian regime and all of these other terrorist organizations that are coming to Hamas's aid and want to destroy Israel. There should be no reason as to why I, as a black woman, as someone who has a moral compass, as someone who has done my research and understands the situation, would want to support Israel over people who actually want to commit genocide. Israel needs to defeat Hamas in order to protect its citizens. And if I was living in a country where I was in constant danger of something like October 7th happening, I would want my government to do the same thing and protect me. This summer, I was speaking at the Objective Standard Institute's Level Up conference in Atlanta, Georgia on the roots of war and the path to peace. More information about the conference is in the comment section below. Comment below, do you think most of the people supporting Hamas know what they're talking about, or are they blindly following what they're being told like I was when I was younger? If you want to see more from me, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Thank you for watching.